Some people just can't seem to take a hint, or even an outright statement of, "I don't work here." This woman does a kindness to an elderly gentleman, but according to this rude woman, the only reason you would do such a kind thing is if you were paid for it. What does she do to take matters into her own hands? When this teen's private property is invaded, what does he do about it? Well, he gets others involved, but this entitled parent just can't seem to let it go. How will our heroes survive? You'll only find out by watching this episode of VoiceyHere's Entitled Parents, featuring IDontWorkHereLady. This story was called, "I Was Just Being Nice, Don't Push My Patience." So this happened yesterday whilst I was out on my usual weekly food shopping trip, so a quick bit of info before we begin. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I use this shop regularly, and now recognize a lot of the usual cashier staff. I was also wearing a black hoodie, leather jacket, jeans and Converse. This is important for later. I was at my local supermarket, just doing my thing, listening to my music and getting my items. I spent a good 20 to 30 minutes gathering the things I needed before heading to the checkout. It was a very nice visit thus far, and I was in no rush. I headed over to the self-service checkouts. I can get very anxious when I'm out on my own, as I have PTSD and BPD, and I prefer as little human contact as possible, so generally opt for the self-service tills. That, and I can keep listening to my music without being rude. I get all my items on the belt and wait for the lady ahead of me to finish paying and packing up her items, and I see an elderly gentleman place one single item down behind mine, and this is where we meet our cast. There's me, obviously, elderly gent, rude woman, and store worker. I take my headphones out and turn towards the elderly gentleman. "Are you just getting the one thing?" "Yes, I am." "Would you like to go ahead of me? It's not fair on you to have to wait for me to get through all my things when you only have the one item." "Are you sure?" "Of course, please." Insert hand gesture to move ahead of me here. I'm in no rush at all. Now, I am usually socially anxious due to my conditions, but I was always taught to respect my elders and enjoy making their day a little easier if I can. I put one headphone back in and am happily waiting when I hear the elderly gent. "How do you work this thing?" Towards the self-service till screen. I put my phone away, come around my trolley, and offer my help to EG, and continue to help him finish his transaction when the rude woman appears behind me.
"Who's left this shopping on the belt?"
Whilst I'm still helping EG. "Oh, sorry, that's mine."
"Well, what are you doing getting your shopping on the clock? You're here to work, not shop."
What? At this point I'm looking at this woman like, WTF? Remember I said I was wearing jeans, leather jacket, etc.?
"You shouldn't be doing your shopping on work time."
Now my anxiety is starting to flare, and I'm getting angry. I just want to run. "Look lady, I don't work here. I just want to get my things and go. Leave me alone."
"Well, I saw you helping that man."
EG had thanked me and left by this point, and I started to put my things through. Yes, I did. I could see he needed some help and the staff were all busy. Besides, what I do is not your business. Now leave me alone.
"Well, you're going around helping people at the till, so you have to work here."
Turning to face this woman. "Look, I was just trying to be nice and help that man with the till. I'm losing my patience, and this is the last time I'm going to say it. Leave me alone." She didn't leave me alone.
"But you look like you work here."
Now the uniform for this store is green and yellow shirts and green trousers, not black leather jackets and jeans. What the? Seriously? I called over the worker that was keeping an eye on these tills, who I regularly have a chat with when I come in. "Hello, how can I help?"
"You need to have words with this worker. She has been very rude to me."
Looking at me and then the woman. "I'm sorry miss, but she doesn't work here."
"But she was helping."
Just because she was helping someone, it doesn't make her a member of staff. Thank you, SW. Returning to the rude woman with a big grin on my face. "See, I don't work here. Now leave me alone." Rude woman's face was a mix of anger, shock, and confusion. Absolutely priceless. I left with my shopping with a big smile and nodded towards the awesome store worker who came to my rescue. Thanks, awesome guy. Now, even if the hero of our story did work at the store, wouldn't you assume that they'd just clocked off? and maybe they were helping that person as just a kindness. I see employees all the time who finish their shift and so they're purchasing whatever it is. They work at KFC, they're getting themselves some food. If they work at a grocery store, they're getting some groceries before they go home. Why is it any of your business if somebody who works at the store is also a customer at the store? She probably can't even fathom that another customer or an employee who's finished their shift might help someone just out of their own generosity. And you know why? Because she's the sort of person who wouldn't do that. And you know what? If she's the sort of person that wouldn't do it herself and therefore can't imagine anyone else doing it, you can kind of understand why she would make that mistake. It's just a mistake that reveals you're a terrible person. This story was called Entitled Parent Threatens to Call the Police on Me for Destroying My Own Climbing Frame. Some background information. I live by a river, and every now and again, the ski club there hosts events like open days or concerts and parties. They also have a small caravan park for people to stay in. Now and again, some kids staying over, or whose parents are at an event, will go on a climbing frame that is in an unfenced part of our garden. Although there are signs saying it's private property, we aren't too bothered, as there aren't many, and they aren't too loud. Recently they hosted the Village Beer Festival, and it ended up being very popular. This meant so many parents decided to take their kids to the ski club for the day. On that morning, I was woken up by dozens of high-pitched screams and looked out of my window to see what was going on. To my surprise, there was about 20 kids all playing on my climbing frame out in the garden. I realized what had happened and was furious. All the parents had left the kids at our climbing frame to entertain themselves while they all got drunk. I was furious. First, we decided to flip over my climbing frame as a passive-aggressive way of saying, "Get lost," but soon after they flipped it back over, almost destroying our fence in the process, and continued to drive us all slowly insane. We decided we needed to do something drastic, and I called my friend who was good at destroying things. He rushed over with some basic tools, screwdriver, Allen key, etc. and we began to disassemble the climbing frame. We got bored of just unscrewing it all, and most of the bolts were all rusty, so we started breaking it and snapping bits off. This was when most parents came to see what we were doing. They were all mainly decent people, and were just wondering about us potentially being vandals. So when they realized that it was ours, they apologized and left. All but one. Enter Entitled Mum. I'm English and that's how we spell mum. Although I thought EMs were more of an American thing, I was surprised to see how much she resembled a classic EM. That trademark haircut, annoying grainy voice, and yes, she was entitled. In the story we have entitled mum, epic but overly sarcastic friend, me, my mum, absolutely awesome person, and I'm not afraid to say I love you for how you dealt with EM. Entitled mum clutching her son.
Excuse me, what are you vandals doing?
Dismantling our climbing frame, if it isn't a problem to you.
Are you criminals trying to say you own this climbing frame that belongs to the ski club?
I escort her to the sign saying private property. See, it's ours. She couldn't easily humbly say sorry and accept she was wrong, so she continues to pick a fight.
Well, why have you just ruined my child's fun?
The child couldn't care less.
And all of the other children's fun.
Because they are distracting us and it's private property. And you should have thought about that before bringing your child to a beer festival.
Well, you should fix it before I call the police on you.
Ooh, I'm so sorry, officer. Don't arrest me for destroying my friend's climbing frame. She is red with anger and begins screaming abuse at my friend about how he should respect her and not be arrogant. All the while, I was calling my house phone from my mobile, waiting for my parents to pick up, when finally, my mum answers. I loudly say, "Hi mum, yeah, this kind lady is having a go at us for breaking our climbing frame and saying that I don't live here. Are you alright explaining? Thanks." She storms over to me and I put my phone on speaker.
Listen here, ma'am. Your evil children are vandalizing a climbing frame and denying my child his right to play.
Shut up, you cow, and look at this. The phone drops to the floor. EM looks at our house and absolutely shocked to see my mother open the window and begin screaming at her to get lost and leave our garden and leave us alone before she comes down and hits her with a rake. EM's confidence drops and she strides away, looking although she had crapped herself, as my mum shouts at her and flips her off. It may not be the most dramatic story in the world, but it's proof to at least me that these people exist everywhere, even in a small English village. Just goes to show that wherever you go in the world, wherever there's people, there will always be entitled people. So avoidance of entitled people can only go so far. You must learn to defend your property. I'm honestly surprised that more of those parents weren't entitled parents. I sort of thought there were going to be a group of them all ganging up together, especially if they're the type of people that'll just let their kids play on other people's private property without really showing any respect for boundaries. This story was called, Fine Then, Give Me a 20 Out of the Till. For reference, I work in a young adult geared clothing store. It's in the top 5 largest stores of this chain in the southern half of the US. It's in a mall with a horrible amount of shoplifting. We often joke that we know our shoplifters because they are the regulars. I'm normally the visual assistant manager, so I set the store up, front everything, dress the mannequins, things like that. We recently had a huge exodus of sales associates, so I've been working overtime to cover some of those shifts. The other day I had something happen that made me question my sanity until they asked for a manager. I was running a register and a customer came up to me. We'll call her Karen. I give the opening saying and notice she has no clothing in hand to buy. Oh, is everything alright, ma'am? So I dropped a $20 bill somewhere in your store? You're going to help me find it. At first I blinked, but called up my general manager, who agreed that I could walk the lady back through her own steps to see if by magic a $20 bill would still be lying on the floor, and no one had thanked God for the miracle of finding a dropped 20 and took it. After a good 15 minutes of circling the store and the fixtures, I met up with Karen and explained that someone could have pocketed the $20 instead of turning it in to us, and there's where things went south. What do you mean, pocketed it? Some people don't put a lost and found value on physical bills or change, ma'am. I can try to look at the cameras if you'd like. No, I don't have an hour for you to look around on a camera. Just go back to the register and give me a 20. Excuse me? You heard me. Go give me a $20 bill, since your staff can't notice a 20 on the ground. Ma'am, we can't do that. Well, I bet if I talked to the manager I would get it. I shrugged at her and led her back to the GM, who walked her away from the registers to talk while I took back over. After a while, I heard Karen all but screaming obscenities, and my GM kicked her out of the store in response. And another snip of my faith in humanity died as Karen yelled one final thing. They are all thieves here. They steal bills from the floor. Okay, so from the store's perspective, this lady could be lying and just want $20 from the till. Is she stupid and hasn't realized this and got angry for no reason? Or is she actually trying to scam them? Question of the day. Have you ever found money in a public space? And what did you do with it? When is it okay to keep and pocket the money because it's considered abandoned? And when do you return it into management? Is it the amount? Does it depend on where you found it? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This story was called, There is no such thing as a meat allergy. Now eat this steak. One of the girls I knew in high school, we'll call her Amy, had such an allergy. She cannot eat meat of any kind without getting seriously ill. Her parents had found this out shortly after her adoption when they made her hamburgers to eat. To this very day, they still felt so guilty over making her eat it and her getting so sick, but they had learned their lesson. So Amy is a vegan, and not by choice. Still, she had an aunt and an uncle who would try to make her eat meat whenever there was a family function. She and her parents would argue with them every time about how she is unable to eat any kind of meat, and they would scoff. Well, when Amy graduated, she had a nice dinner planned for herself and her friends. She cooked the vegan meals herself, but made sure there were meat options for her friends and family if they didn't want the vegan meals. I wasn't there, but Phil, being a mutual friend, was. He told me what happened at this party. Amy's entitled aunt and uncle showed up and immediately tried to get Amy to eat some of the meaty dish that they brought, along with steak that was cooked. Amy, of course, refused. Phil overheard them speaking. How many times do I have to say it before it sticks in your head? I have a meat allergy. I can't eat meat.
There's no such thing as a meat allergy. Now eat this steak.
Sit down, eat, or we won't give you our present.
Amy just walked away from them and went to some friends. Phil remembered seeing them skulking around the tables with the food, but he didn't see what they did. Apparently, they took some of the salad that was made and hid some chunks of meat in there and covered it with the ranch dressing. Yep, you can guess what happened when it was time to eat. Thankfully, Amy only got the mild effects of the allergy. She did break out into hives, got stomach cramps, and threw up. Her parents still took her to the hospital to make sure it wasn't going to get any worse. The entitled aunt and uncle got into some serious trouble for making their niece sick and were banned from any family gatherings once the word got out. They wormed their way back into the family's favor, somehow, but they were no longer allowed to bring any dishes to the parties, and not allowed at the food tables until everyone else got a plate first. Want to know the stupid part? Despite witnessing Amy's reaction, despite the internet showing them that the allergy exists, despite the fact several doctors told them it was real, the entitled aunt and uncle still believe that the meat allergy doesn't exist. Pride can be such a dangerous thing. It's not only self-destructive, but in this case, it meant that the entitled aunt and uncle caused harm to their niece. Why? All because they didn't believe in a meat allergy? I don't know if they're in denial. Maybe they were such avid meat eaters that they couldn't believe in a world where somebody could be allergic to meat. Whatever the case was originally, it's obvious because they took a public position, they then felt like they had to defend it at every single opportunity, and somehow prove her wrong that she was lying. You have to be pretty stupid to take a risk to cause potential harm to someone else just to prove that you were right. Let's say theoretically that it was made up. Isn't just knowing that they're making up a disease enough to just want to ignore that person? Why would you want to actively engage with them? It would be better just to leave that kind of person alone. If you'd like your story to be narrated by me, don't forget to visit the subreddit r/VoiceyHere, link below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Alright, I'll see you in the next one.